The bitter wind of a December morning swept through the crowded streets of New Orleans, carrying the smell of roasted chestnuts and car exhaust. People hurried past, bundled in coats, their eyes glued to their phones or the ground ahead. On the corner of Royal Street sat a woman wrapped in a tattered army jacket, her hair silvered with dust, her eyes lost in 1,000 memories. A cardboard sign rested by her side. Veteran, hungry, anything helps. Few noticed her until Senator John Kennedy, on his way to a local veterans fundraiser, stopped in his tracks. Cameras were following him, but what he did next wasn't for the lenses. It was instinct, a quiet pull from the heart that told him this moment was different. He saw not a beggar, but a story written in pain, pride, and forgotten sacrifice. As he approached, the woman stiffened, pulling her blanket closer. Years of being ignored had taught her that pity came with strings. Kennedy knelt beside her, his breath misting in the cold air, and gently asked, "Ma'am, what's your name?" Her eyes darted up, suspicious but curious. "Sergeant Marie Dalton," she said softly, her voice carrying both strength and fatigue. The senator's expression softened. "Sergeant Dalton," he repeated with respect, "you served this country. You shouldn't be sitting here alone." The crowd around them began to pause, drawn by the unusual sight of a senator kneeling on a street corner, speaking to a homeless woman as if she were the most important person in the world. The city's noise seemed to fade for a moment as two worlds collided, one of power, the other of survival. Marie's story poured out in fragments, each word heavy with memory. She had served 2 tours in Afghanistan, lost her husband to PTSD, and came home to find herself fighting the same invisible war. Medical bills drained her savings, and after a series of bad luck and bureaucracy, she found herself living out of a car, until that, too, was taken. Kennedy listened, not interrupting, not offering rehearsed sympathy. His eyes glistened as he realized how many like her were invisible to the system he helped run. When she finished, she lowered her gaze, expecting him to drop a few bills and walk away. Instead, he took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. "This isn't charity," he said softly. "It's a promise." The moment was caught on dozens of phones, but what would follow was far beyond a viral video. That night, Kennedy couldn't shake the image of Marie sitting in the cold. During his speech at the fundraiser, he went off script, his voice trembling slightly. "Today," he said, "I met a soldier who gave everything for this country and got nothing in return." The audience, filled with donors and dignitaries, fell silent. "We talk about freedom and sacrifice," he continued, "but we forget the people who carried the weight of that freedom on their backs." Then he made a pledge to start a new initiative that would provide housing, counseling, and job programs for homeless veterans in Louisiana. He named it Operation Homefront Hearts. The announcement wasn't planned, but it felt right. Real. The room erupted in applause, but for Kennedy it wasn't about applause. It was about redemption. Meanwhile, Marie slept that night in a local shelter Kennedy's team had arranged. For the first time in years, she had a warm bed and a door that locked. Yet comfort didn't erase the years of pain. She struggled with guilt, survivor's guilt, failure, and the uneasy feeling of being helped. The next morning, she was greeted by Kennedy's assistant, who offered her coffee and a simple question. "Would you tell your story?" Hesitant at first, Marie agreed. Days later, she found herself in front of cameras, not as a victim, but as a voice for countless others. Her trembling hands held notes, but when she spoke, the words flowed like truth breaking a dam. Her message was raw, real, and unforgettable. Within weeks, donations poured into Operation Homefront Hearts. Volunteers built shelters, doctors offered free care, and local businesses pledged jobs for veterans. Kennedy visited Marie often, not as a politician seeking headlines, but as a friend checking on someone who reminded him why he got into public service. Marie began mentoring other homeless veterans, guiding them toward the help she once feared to ask for. She laughed again, rediscovering fragments of the soldier and woman she used to be. Yet she still visited her old corner sometimes, not to beg, but to listen. "I sat here for years invisible," she'd tell those who stopped. "Now I'm here to see you." Her voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had walked through hell and made it back with grace. Months later, during a ceremony honoring veterans, Kennedy surprised the crowd by inviting Marie to the stage. Cameras flashed as she walked up, her posture straight, her face glowing with quiet pride. Kennedy handed her a folded flag and said, "For service beyond the battlefield." Tears welled in her eyes as the crowd rose to their feet. "This," she whispered into the microphone, "isn't about me. It's about everyone who's been forgotten. If you see someone struggling, don't walk past. Sit down, listen. That's how change starts." The room went silent, many wiping their eyes. In that moment, Marie wasn't a statistic or a symbol. She was hope. As weeks turned into months, Operation Homefront Hearts expanded nationwide. News outlets called it a grassroots revolution sparked by compassion, but Kennedy refused to take full credit. It started with one conversation, he'd say, one act of seeing someone who'd been unseen for too long. Marie's face became a beacon for the campaign, her story told in schools, churches, and newsrooms across the country. She received letters from veterans who said her courage gave them strength to seek help. Her small act of sharing had rippled into something much larger, a movement reminding America of its forgotten heroes. Years later, Kennedy stood once again on Royal Street, now lined with murals celebrating veterans. One painting caught his eye. It was Marie, smiling beneath a painted sunrise, her sign replaced with the words, "Hope lives here." She had passed away the previous winter, peacefully in her sleep, but her legacy burned bright. A young veteran approached him, saying, "Sir, I got off the streets because of her program." "Because of you?" Kennedy smiled faintly. "No," he said, looking up at the mural, "because of her." The city buzzed around them, alive with the sound of compassion reborn, and so, a simple encounter on a cold morning became a story that transformed lives. It reminded a nation that greatness isn't measured by titles, but by the moments we choose to kneel beside another human being. John Kennedy didn't plan to make history that day. He simply listened to a soul who had carried too much alone. And in doing so, he reminded everyone watching that kindness, when acted upon, can change not just a person's life, but the heart of an entire country. The story of Marie Dalton became more than a headline. It became a movement, a mirror, and a promise that no hero would ever be invisible again.